So you look at Europe. Europe to me is not a like clean democracy that is treating its people well. They're living in a post-World War II false version of what the world order really is, when what it really is hardcore people that will do whatever they can until they meet sufficient physical force that stops them.
From the foundation that people are just people and people don't change, and all of life is based on resource limitations that ultimately we fight for, I can't disagree with you. That is the logical conclusion based off of that foundational evidence. I think what we need to adjust for is the fact that people can change. People can change, people can make different decisions, and oftentimes people do make different decisions. Sometimes the pain that we run into is sufficient to get us to change something about our ideology, something about our point of view, something about our vision, right? That's how civil rights came to be. That's how the end of slavery came to be. Economically, it just made sense to keep having slaves. But at some point, there was a social transformation that fought against that. Same thing with women having the right to vote. At some point, there was a social, I'm not saying there wasn't also an economic benefit, but it didn't start from the economic benefit. It started from something else, and then an economic benefit was found later on. Very similar to what we're seeing, I think, right now with our environmental protection passions and interests. Like economically, you don't protect the government, you don't protect the environment. But there's something else at play that we then find an economic benefit to add to it. So there's a social element that's very unpredictable. And when you talk about people being people, you also have to acknowledge that people change as different phases of their life change. If you put a 25-year-old in power as a king or a queen or whatever else, they literally change the way they rule by the time that they're 65 and die. We are all different people in college than we are when we have a couple of kids. We're all different when we're broke than when we're wealthy. Like we change. Our questions about the universe and ourselves change, our interests change, our values shift, even though we are still the same core people. And if you take everything away from us, we will very quickly revert back to animalistic survival tendencies. For the most part, there are still exceptions that don't do that. There are people who give up all worldly goods to become monks or become priests or nuns or whatever else. So there are exceptions to the rule, which makes it hard to apply the rule consistently everywhere. But when it comes to the institutions themselves, those are not monks. And those are not the rarities. If anything, the institution becomes the place, the saving grace for the low performance people. It's the safe haven. When you don't have any other skill, you find your way to doing something that's safe and simple and protected and follows the same regimented process as something else. So I don't disagree with you that people are people. And I don't disagree with you that we need to find a way to come through where we currently are. But where the two things don't line up for me are if you believe that people are so kind of, not pessimistically, but realistically tied to their carnal desires, their carnal core processes, then how could you ever believe that we would come through? Unless what you're really saying is that in the filtering process of coming through, 60% of people don't make it.
I'm saying something slightly different. So this started with you saying that people have to come to grips that we're not the democratic country that people think we are,
right.
That this is, we are willing to make concessions for our capitalistic tendencies, right, in a way that Europe is not. My read on the situation at a high level is very different. And it goes something like this. Everything is economics.
Everything is economics.
And
I agree.
We build up from that. And we are not a capitalistic nation and haven't been for a very long time. You can't be capitalist and deficit spend. Let's start with that, because now you are rigging the game. You can only do that with a central bank. The second you have a central bank, you're rigging the game. Every empire ever that has had a central bank has collapsed. They all collapse for the exact same knowable, predictable reason, and that is debt and deficit spending. The math just ends up taking over. And so the reason that people are so angry, and they have a right to be angry, and this is actually what I was thinking about when you were saying people change, I'll say it slightly differently. We are automata that responds to stimulus in very predictable ways. And when you take us en masse, This is why history loops, because we're just going to respond. If you create a K-shaped economy, always and forever, for all time, ever, 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 you're going to get populism, because populism is...
If you haven't discovered your natural-born spy skills, then somebody else might be using theirs against you. CIA teaches us that there are only 3 types of people in the world: those who motivate, those who manipulate, and those who are being controlled by one of the other 2. I created a 3-minute CIA-style quiz to help you unlock your secret psychological advantage and identify your hidden blind spot. This test was developed to help you weaponize your natural-born gifts and use them to get ahead of 99% of people in power, wealth, and purpose. It was also designed to make sure that you can protect yourself against those who would use their skills against you. All you have to do is click on the first link in the description below or scan the QR code on your screen to start your spy quiz now. I want you to discover your secret spy superpower and use it for good before somebody else uses their power against you.
Oh, life sucks because you're stealing from me. I just don't understand how. And so they elect a big, strong man to come and slap people around. They want to tribe up and be on a team because it's scary now. They don't know how they're going to make ends meet. The pie really is shrinking.
Right.
And it's being siphoned up to the elite, to the wealthy, and everybody else is left to fight over scraps. Everything's getting more expensive. And so they just want someone they want to be on a team, and they want someone that's going to fight for their side.
And they want to win.
They want to win. They want to hurt the other side. And so when I look at this, I go, okay, let's say you really had a gun to my head and I had to solve this problem based on cause and effect, based on first principles thinking, based on the economy being close enough to a machine that you can think from an engineering perspective. I would go, okay, you absolutely have to have a thriving middle class. You cannot have the distance between the poor and the wealthy that you have right now. So then you start asking, well, how do I get there? And if you ask the left, they're going to say you take from the wealthy and redistribute to the poor, which does not work. So you have to do it through force, which I can certainly go down that path from an explanation. My community's heard it before. But the other one is you have to create a situation where there's tolerable inequality, but that you don't get intolerable or toxic inequality. And how do you stop that? You stop that by having a balanced budget, because that stops inflation. Inflation stops all of the money from fleeing into the stock market, which is how the value goes up and up and up. And so I've never heard an argument, and I look for them, for how you solve the current, what feels like a cultural problem, unless you address the economic problem.
What's the problem? Or you're saying in general, any problem?
No. The economic problem that we are dealing with right now, that we deal with all throughout history, always and forever, is exactly the same. It is debt and deficit spending. And if you understand what that's caused by, and you stop that, then you would naturally find yourself working back out of this problem.
But you can't, in a country that creates its own currency, the only option is to create a deflationary pressure on the currency, like what Clinton did when he was in office. But to create deflation on the currency is essentially to cost companies more than it costs consumers.
So you're already inside of a frame of reference, and the frame of reference that you're inside of is the central bank. Once you have a central bank, you're just asking politicians, hey, please don't abuse the ability to create money. And for a long time, they won't. That's why these cycles take between 150 and 250 years, but they always break, always.
And they always print more money.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
They always fail for the same reason. Once you realize you can print the money, it's just the temptation is too strong. And then once you get the weaknesses, the 2000 crash, the 2008 crash, COVID, you get those 3 successive things, and now all of a sudden the
momentum,
the economics, you just like, you have to keep printing, and that's creating this crazy K-shaped economy, which then gives rise to populism, which is exactly why Trump happens 8 years after the 2008 financial crisis, and now you're in deep.
So do you see a solution? Do you see a way out?
There is a way out, but I don't think that we're going to take it. It's what Ray Dalio calls a beautiful deleveraging. There's basically 4 forces. One of them is to move in the opposite direction so that you're not just inflating your currency, but you're going to have to do some inflation still, because you've got to spark the economy. You have to do some redistribution of wealth. You have to do some increasing of taxes. And you have to balance your fucking budget. And so the one thing, austerity, one thing that people aren't going to do is the austerity. And so we're in the spiral now where, barring some major change, and this is why I say Trump's gambit is that he's going to grow his way out of this. So your only two options are to basically devalue the currency like crazy, which he's doing. It's not great, but he's doing it. And then you have to grow even faster than you devalue the currency so that you can get growth in your economy, pay off the debt with the weaker dollar. But if you can return manufacturing back by making your exports cheaper because you lowered the value of the dollar, now you can actually do that. Now you've got working class jobs again. But of course, it's all happening right at the same time as AI, which is going to be an unknown disruption.
Or potentially AI is what contributes to making things so much less expensive. And then the inexpensiveness of what we create plus the reduced value of the dollar, AI basically saves the day. I'm sure that's one potential outcome too.
It literally. Now, if you were going to steel man the argument of Europe doing this better, because there are definitely going to be people in the comments right now that are like, Andrew, come on, you've got this chance to show this capitalistic asshole like how this actually works. What is the thing that makes you look at Europe and go, that's better?
So I think there's two things based off of what we're talking about. And I don't think that the gap between us is too significant. I think that it might be a bit of nuanced how we define our terms, right? So when I talk about capitalism, what I'm talking about is generating money, creating a profit, generating money, making a good or a service that's of need, and then pricing it as high as possible to the person who can't get that good or product on their own, that good or service on their own. So then they're willing to exchange maximum optimal currency, money, in exchange for the service or good that they're getting. In the United States, we are very focused on capitalism. How much money can I make? How can I make optimal money? How can I make a bad pizza at a high price rather than making a good pizza at a low price? That's how we think in the United States. That's not how everybody thinks, but that's how the wealthiest, most successful businesses become the wealthiest, most successful businesses, because they are able to optimize their pricing. That is a very capitalistic thing. And then we have carried that mentality into other parts of our life as well. That's why Americans are obsessed with efficiencies, right? How do I make the house the most efficient price to heat or cool? I mean, for most people, the only reason they invest in solar or insulated windows isn't because they care about the climate. It's because they're trying to take the cost of insulated windows over the next 10 years against the cost of heating or cooling my house for the same 10-year period, and will I save money or not? So we've got this focus on efficiency that just doesn't exist outside of the United States, not in Asia, not in Europe, not in Africa, not in Latin America. So when I talk about a capitalist country, that's what I'm talking about, is this relentless desire for more and more efficiency, rooted in the idea that we want to be very efficient with the money that we earn versus the money that we spend. That efficiency doesn't exist in Europe. So in Europe, their governance, their institutions are happy to be fat and slow and inefficient and overinflated, and they have to charge their people an incredible amount of taxes to pay for the big bloated bureaucracy that they have. And they give up on the opportunity for fast, rapid decision-making because everybody has to have 7 different committees before they go anywhere. I'm not saying it's better than the United States. What I'm saying is that they will continue to value this bureaucratic bloatedness because it will, they believe, prevent them from becoming this capitalist villain right away. Is there room for corruption? Of course, all institutions can be corrupted, right? And is there an incentive in Europe for the middle class to try to earn more or make more? Not really. I've traveled throughout Europe, and I've been shocked at the lack of individual ambition and drive among most people. And when you just look at the number of millionaires and billionaires in the world, you can very clearly see that if they start in Europe, they end up coming to the United States because they culturally don't fit into that environment. All of that being said, one of Europe's biggest weaknesses is the fact that it has been able to, since 1945, live in this bubble of what's the right democratic process, instead of in a bubble of we need to protect our borders, we need to be strong, we need to keep ourselves safe. It was only this morning that the French president, Macron, came out and said that to be free, you must be feared. And he talked about that in the context of the fact that France is deploying nuclear-tipped air-to-ground missiles all across its European allies. Tactical nukes being actively deployed. Not used in war, but pre-positioned, forward deployed so that they can be called upon. So now we're already seeing how Europe is following our lead. Europe is following the authoritarian model more so now than it was in the past. To be free, you must be feared. That is a very different message than what they believed in the past, right? To be free, you must be fair. To be free, you must be, have a common goal, whatever else. Just like you were saying earlier, like the Machiavellian book that you were talking about, where we need a common narrative to put us all together. In my experience, that is all true. That is all real. And we are struggling right now because there is no common, valid, credible, authoritative, not authoritarian, but authoritative narrative for us to follow. So we are surrounded on all sides by bad options. And the only way that we are going to be able to navigate through bad options is either through a lens of what we believe to be fair, just, right, correct, tolerable, or we kind of pursue options and recognize that some of the steps and decisions that we make along the path of choosing options will just make us more and more miserable. It's like the person who ends up pursuing a career in law, even though they hate law because they want more options, where the person who goes into nonprofit work never makes enough money, but has an abundance of happiness in their job. I'm not one to talk about being happy. I'm not one to talk about being wealthy. I'm the kind of person who kind of jumps between. Sometimes I feel like I want more options. Sometimes I feel like I want to live a little bit happier and more comfortable, and I've got the freedom to make those decisions. So we are all in a world now where we've been promised that we're going to be wealthy. And now we're realizing that's not really true. Just like the generations before us, and we've watched our parents not get wealthy. We've watched our grandparents not retire wealthy. And now here we are, anybody between the ages of 25 and 55, staring in the mirror and saying, shit, man, like I believed all this for a long time. And now I'm coming to grips with something I can see, but it's different than what I believe. So I have that cognitive dissonance again.
Well, we shall see. As we said at the very beginning, fog of war. It is unknown exactly how this is going to play out, but man, your analysis is super, super helpful.
If you like that video, you're going to love the next one, and I'll see you there. CIA doesn't want people who want to be CIA. CIA is looking for people who have a psychological need for external validation. And then CIA can become the single source for that external validation.